Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into the core of, the global system, really. Business, trade, and commerce. We're going to be drawing on the source material you provided to really unpack these ideas, from basic definitions to how they actually play out in the real world.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is how we use these words all the time. Business, trade, commerce, they're just part of our everyday language. But most of us have never really stopped to think about what they truly mean.
Right. It's like we know them when we see them, but defining them, that's another story.
Exactly. So let's start with business. Our source defines it as an occupation, really, that's all about buying, producing, selling, or procuring goods and services. And the goal, profit, of course.
Okay, so that makes sense. But there's got to be more to it than just making money, right?
You're absolutely right. It's also about satisfying human needs within a society. Like, think about all the things you need and want in your daily life.
Food, clothes, transportation, entertainment. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Exactly. And businesses exist to provide all of those things. It's about meeting a demand, fulfilling a need that people have.
Okay, so it's not just about making a buck. It's about filling a gap, providing something of value to others.
Precisely. Now, this brings us to an important distinction: economic activities versus non-economic activities.
Oh, interesting. I'm guessing economic activities are the ones that involve, money.
You got it. So, like, working in a factory, managing a team, providing a service for a fee, these are all economic activities because they're done with the goal of earning income.
Makes sense. So what would be a non-economic activity then?
Think about things you do out of love, compassion, duty, or just personal satisfaction, like cooking dinner for your family.
Okay, so I'm not running a business out of my kitchen, even though I do make a mean lasagna.
Maybe not yet. But the point is, you're doing it out of love for your family, not for profit. Our source gives other examples, too, like respecting the national flag or helping an injured person.
Okay, I get it. It's all about the motivation behind the action. So working in a factory equals economic activity, while respecting the national flag, that falls under non-economic.
Exactly. It's a simple but important distinction to keep in mind as we delve deeper into the world of business.
All right, so we've got economic activity, the need to meet human needs, and the goal of making a profit. What else makes something a business?
Well, our source lays out 7 key features that really define a business activity.
7. Okay, lay 'em on me.
All right, the first one we've already touched on. It has to be an economic activity with, the intention of making a profit.
Got it. Profit motive. Check. What's number 2?
It involves producing or procuring both goods and services.
Oh, so it's not just one or the other. It's the combination of both.
Right. It's about how those two things work together.
Okay, that's interesting. So my homemade lasagna, even if I did start charging for it, still wouldn't qualify because I'm only providing a service, not a good, I guess.
Well, you're actually providing both. The lasagna itself is the good, and the act of preparing and serving it is the service.
Oh, that's right. I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah.
All right, so what's feature number 3?
Feature number 3 is that there needs to be an exchange or a sale. You're not just making something for yourself, you're putting it out there for a wider market to, buy or trade for.
Right, so it can't just be for personal consumption. Okay, number 4.
Number 4, the activity has to be conducted on a regular basis. It can't just be a one-off thing.
So like having a yard sale to get rid of old stuff wouldn't make me a business owner?
Exactly. It needs to be something you do consistently.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So what are the last 3 features on this checklist?
Well, the 5th one is the profit motive, which we've already talked about. Then we have uncertainty and risk, which kind of go hand in hand.
Ah, yes, the thrill of the unknown. Every business decision comes with the potential for success.
Oh.
Or things going completely sideways.
Exactly. Our source really emphasizes that risk is inherent in any business venture. It's part of the deal.
Makes sense. You can't have the potential for reward without the possibility of, things not going as planned.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got a solid definition of business now and a checklist to help us identify it. But I'm curious, how does business relate to other terms we hear a lot, like profession and employment? I mean, they all seem kind of similar, but I'm guessing there are some key differences.
You're right. They do overlap in some ways, but they're also distinct concepts. Think of a profession as requiring, specialized knowledge and skills, like doctors, lawyers, accountants, they all have to undergo extensive training and education.
Okay, so it's not just about what you do, but also the level of expertise and qualifications you bring to it.
Exactly. And professions are often governed by a professional body, like a bar association for lawyers or a medical board for doctors.
So it's like a set of standards and ethics that you have to adhere to. What about employment? Where does that fit in?
Employment is when you work for someone else in exchange for, a salary or wages. You're essentially trading your time and skills for regular compensation.
Okay, so it's a contractual agreement where you're bound by the employer's, rules and expectations. So a lawyer working for a law firm would be both a professional and an employee, right?
Exactly. They're fulfilling both definitions simultaneously.
All right, I'm starting to see how these pieces fit together. But earlier, we touched on the idea that profit isn't the only goal of a business. I'm really intrigued by that. What are some of those other objectives?
Well, that's a great question, and it leads us to the next part of our exploration.
So we're talking about business goals that go beyond just, the bottom line.
Exactly. Our source calls it a multiple objective framework, which is a fancy way of saying that businesses aren't just driven by profit. There are other factors at play.
Okay, I'm all ears. Break it down for me. What are these other objectives?
Well, there are three main categories: organizational objectives, social objectives, and personal objectives. And they're all kind of interconnected.
Okay, so it's like a three-legged stool. You need all of them for the business to stand strong.
That's a great analogy. So let's start with organizational objectives. These are the goals that are essential for the survival and growth of the business itself.
Right. So things like making sure the business stays afloat, financially stable, able to compete in the market.
Exactly. Our source breaks it down into the three stages: survival, profit, and growth. They kind of build on each other.
Okay, so first you got to survive, then you can focus on making a profit, and then you can use that profit to fuel growth and expansion.
Right. It's a natural progression.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about social objectives? What falls into that category?
Social objectives are all about a business's responsibility to, society. It's about recognizing that a business doesn't operate in a vacuum.
Right. It has an impact on the community, the environment, its employees, all of that.
Exactly. So social objectives might include things like providing quality products and services, creating jobs, treating employees fairly, being ethical and sustainable.
Okay, so it's about doing business in a way that benefits not just the company, but also the wider world.
Precisely. And then we have personal objectives.
Which I'm guessing have to do with the individuals within the business, like the employees.
Exactly. These objectives focus on the well-being and development of the people who work for the company.
Okay, so things like fair wages, safe working conditions, opportunities for growth, maybe even, perks and benefits.
All of that. It's about creating a positive and supportive work environment where employees feel valued and motivated.
It makes sense. Happy employees tend to be more productive, which ultimately benefits the company as a whole. So it's not just about profits, it's about people too.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between economic success and social responsibility. And that brings us back to the concept of risk, which we talked about earlier. Remember how we said it's an inherent part of doing business?
Yeah, you can't avoid it, but you can, try to manage it, right?
Absolutely. And to manage risk effectively, you need to understand the different types of risk that businesses face.
Okay, so what kinds of risks are we talking about?
Our source highlights two main categories: speculative risk and pure risk.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
You
What's
need
the difference
background
between
for your
those two?
TikTok videos?
Speculative
Nothing
risk
works
is the
better
kind
than
of risk where
Minecraft?
there's a potential for
Download the
both
video
gain
for
and
free
loss.
and start to
Okay,
earn
so
money
like
now through TikTok
investing in the
beta
stock
program.
market.
Yeah.
You can make a lot of money, or you could lose your shirt.
Exactly. Or launching a new product. There's the potential for it to be a huge success, but there's also the risk that it'll flop.
Right, so with speculative risk, it's all about weighing the potential rewards against the potential downsides,
Precisely. And then there's pure risk.
which is,
Pure risk is the kind of risk where there's only the potential for loss. There's no upside.
oh, okay, give me an example.
Sure. Think of things like a fire damaging your inventory, or a natural disaster destroying your factory, or even theft or fraud.
Right, those are all situations where something bad happens
Yeah.
and the business suffers a loss.
Exactly.
So with pure risk, it's all about trying to prevent those bad things from happening, or at least minimizing the damage if they do.
You got it. That's where things like insurance, security systems, disaster preparedness plans all come in. It's about creating a safety net to protect the business from those unforeseen events.
Makes sense. So we've got speculative risk, which is like a calculated gamble, and pure risk, which is about minimizing potential losses. What else do we need to know about risk?
Well, it's important to understand that risk is an inherent part of business. You can't eliminate it entirely, but you can learn to manage it effectively.
Okay, good to know. So we've covered a lot of ground here. The definition of business, the different types of objectives, the role of risk. Where do we go from here?
Well, now that we have a good grasp of the fundamentals, I think it's time to dive into the different types of business activities. We'll explore the two main categories, industry and commerce.
Okay, I'm ready. Break it down for me. What's the difference between industry and commerce?
Think of it this way. Industry is all about, creation. It's the process of transforming raw materials into finished goods, adding value along the way. Commerce, on the other hand, is all about exchange. It's about getting those goods and services from the producers to the consumers.
Okay, so industry is the maker, and commerce is the mover and shaker.
Exactly.
All right, I'm following you. So let's start with industry. What are the different types?
Our source outlines three main types of industries: primary, secondary, and tertiary. You can kind of think of them as a chain reaction, each one building on the next.
Okay, I like where this is going. So what's primary industry all about?
Primary industry is all about extracting raw materials from nature.
Got it. So things like mining, farming, fishing, logging, the stuff that comes straight from the earth.
Exactly. Those raw materials then become the input for secondary industries.
Which is where those raw materials are transformed into something usable.
Right. Secondary industries take those raw materials and process them, manufacture them, turn them into finished goods.
Okay, so like iron ore being turned into steel or crude oil being refined into gasoline.
Exactly. And then we have tertiary industries.
Tertiary industries, what do?
Tertiary industries don't produce goods. They provide services. They're the support system for primary and secondary industries.
Ah, okay. So things like transportation, banking, insurance, retail, healthcare, education, all the essential services that keep the economy running.
You got it. Tertiary industries are all about facilitating the flow of goods, services, and information.
Okay, so primary industries extract, secondary industries transform, and tertiary industries support. That's a really helpful way to think about it.
It is a pretty neat system when you think about it.
It is. So what about commerce? How does that fit in?
Well, commerce is all about bridging the gap between producers and consumers. It encompasses all the activities involved in the exchange of goods and services.
Okay, so buying, selling, trading, all that good stuff.
Exactly. And it also includes all the supporting activities that make that exchange possible.
Right.
Things like transportation and logistics, which get the goods from point A to point B. Banking and finance, which handles the money side of things, insurance, which protects against loss or damage, and of course, advertising and marketing, which helps create demand for those products and services.
Right. So it's not just about the transaction itself, but about all the things that have to happen behind the scenes to make that transaction possible.
Precisely.
Wow. It's really amazing when you stop and think about how complex this whole system is, all these different pieces working together to keep the economy running.
It really is. And it's constantly evolving, too.
Speaking of evolving, we talked earlier about risk being an inherent part of business. What are some of the specific causes of business risk? I mean, what are the things that keep business owners up at night?
That's a great question. And our source actually breaks it down into four main categories: natural causes, human causes, economic causes, and other causes.
Okay, let's unpack those. Starting with natural causes, I'm guessing those are the things that are, well, beyond our control.
You got it. Think earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, droughts, even things like pandemics.
Right? Mother Nature can be a pretty tough business partner. So how do businesses deal with those kinds of risks?
Well, a lot of it comes down to preparedness. Having a solid plan in place in case something happens, investing in insurance to cover potential losses, even thinking carefully about where you locate your business. Are you in a flood zone or an area prone to earthquakes?
Right. It's about being proactive rather than reactive.
Uh,
What about human causes? What falls under that category?
Human causes are interesting because they stem from, the unpredictable nature of people.
Okay, like what? Give me some examples.
Sure. Think employee negligence, strikes, fraud, theft, sabotage, even just simple human error.
Right. All those things can really disrupt a business.
They can. And it's one of the reasons why it's so important to build a strong organizational culture, one that emphasizes responsibility, clear communication, and thorough training.
Right. You want to minimize the chances of those human-caused problems happening in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, what about economic causes? What are some examples of those?
Economic causes are all about, well, the ups and downs of the economy. Things like recessions, inflation, fluctuations in interest rates, changes in consumer demand, increased competition,
Yeah.
even things like political instability that can impact trade.
It's a lot to keep track of. How do businesses stay ahead of the curve when it comes to economic risks?
One key strategy is diversification, not putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Right, so maybe expanding into different markets, offering a variety of products or services, having a global presence.
Exactly. And it's also important to stay informed about, global trends, economic forecasts, what's happening in the political landscape.
Okay, that makes sense. And finally, we have other causes. What are those?
Other causes are basically anything that doesn't fit neatly into the first three categories. So things like changes in government regulations, technological disruptions, maybe shifts in social trends that impact consumer behavior.
Right, the world is constantly changing, and businesses have to adapt.
Exactly. And the businesses that are most successful are the ones that are agile and innovative. They're the ones who can anticipate change and embrace new ideas.
This has been a really fascinating conversation. We've covered so much ground, from the basic definition of business to the different types of objectives to the various risks that businesses face.
It's been a great discussion. I hope our listeners are walking away with a deeper understanding of the complexities and the dynamism of the business world.
Absolutely. We've learned that business is about so much more than just making money. It's about creating value, meeting needs, and operating in a way that benefits both the company and the wider world.
Right. And it's about recognizing that risk is an inherent part of the journey. But with careful planning, strategic thinking, and a willingness to adapt, businesses can navigate those risks and achieve success.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So we left off talking about the different categories of business risk. You mentioned natural causes, human causes, economic causes, and what was that last one?
The catch-all category. Other causes.
Right. Okay, so we talked about natural causes like earthquakes and floods, things that are totally out of our control. What about those human causes? Those seem a bit more, I don't know, preventable maybe.
Well, you'd think so, but human behavior can be pretty unpredictable, right?
True. And we're all human, so mistakes happen.
Exactly. And sometimes those mistakes can have a big impact on a business. Think about things like employee negligence, maybe someone not following safety procedures properly.
Oh, yeah, that could be a big problem.
Or strikes where employees walk off the job. Or even intentional acts like fraud or sabotage.
Wow, that's scary to think about.
Yeah.
So how do businesses protect themselves from those kinds of risks?
A lot of it comes down to having good systems in place. Thorough training programs for employees, clear communication, and strong internal controls.
So it's about creating a culture of responsibility and accountability within the organization.
Exactly. And it's also about things like background checks on potential employees, secure data management systems, making sure there are checks and balances in place to prevent fraud.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, so we've got natural causes, human causes.
Well,
What was next?
economic causes.
Ah, yes. The economy. Always a wild card, right?
It can be. Businesses are really vulnerable to economic ups and downs. We're talking
Mhm.
about things like recessions, inflation, fluctuations in interest rates.
Right. All those things can make it really hard to, plan and make smart business decisions.
They can. And it's not just about the big picture stuff, like the overall health of the economy. Businesses also have to worry about things like changes in consumer demand. What if people suddenly stop buying what you're selling?
Yikes. That would be a problem.
It would. And then there's increased competition. What if a new company comes along and starts offering a similar product or service at a lower price?
So businesses have to be able to adapt to all these changes.
They do. And that's where things like market research and strategic planning come in. Businesses need to be able to anticipate these changes and adjust their strategies accordingly.
Sounds like it takes a lot of flexibility and forward thinking.
It does. And then there's that last category we talked about, other causes.
Right, the catch-all. So what are some examples of those other risks?
Well, this category can include a wide range of things. Things like changes in government regulations, maybe a new law is passed that impacts your industry,
Okay, I can see how that would be a challenge.
or technological disruptions. Think about how the internet has changed, well, just about everything. Businesses that weren't able to adapt to the digital age, a lot of them, they didn't survive.
Right, so businesses have to be able to embrace new technologies and find ways to use them to their advantage.
Exactly. And then there are shifts in social trends, what people value, what they're interested in, how they spend their time and money. All of that is constantly changing. Businesses that can't keep up with those trends, they risk becoming irrelevant.
It's a lot to keep up with. It makes you realize that running a successful business takes a lot more than just, having a good idea.
It does. It takes vision, it takes resilience, it takes a willingness to take risks, and it takes a whole lot of hard work.
Well said. I think we've covered just about everything, wouldn't you say?
I think so. We've gone from the very definition of business to the different types of industries and commerce, to the importance of social responsibility, to the ever-present element of risk.
It's been quite a journey. And I have to say, I've learned a lot. I hope our listeners have too. We've seen that business is about so much more than just making money. It's about creating value, meeting needs, and making a positive impact on the world.
Couldn't agree more.
So to wrap things up, I'd like to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. We've talked about how businesses have to balance profit with social responsibility. They have to consider the needs of their employees, their customers, the environment. So what do you think? What makes a business truly successful in the long run? Is it just about the bottom line? Or is there something more?
Something for all of us to think about.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of business, trade, and commerce. We'll see you next time.